start.
Just finished that meeting.
All right, we'll wait until a couple more who are in the queue joining us. So, okay, right. Good morning, everyone. All right, welcome to today's HL7AU FHIR Work Group meeting. We have a fair number of folks joining us already. We definitely have quorum. So we might as well start the meeting in the interest of time, because we do have a fair bit of agenda items to address. So what I will do is I will share my screen.
Yeah, I can see that now.
Am I sharing the correct screen? There's so many screens to share. Okay,
I can see the meeting minutes.
Yep, so that's the correct screen. All right, so let's get the ball rolling. Given that we have a fair bit of items to address today, so let's sort of cut to the chase. First order of the meeting is approving the meeting minutes of the previous meeting. It has been a while since we have the conference call meeting. The last one being the September the 4th, and here is the meeting minutes. So I will put the meeting minutes into the chat just in case if anyone wants to have the luxury of reading it on your own screen. So that's that meeting minutes. So, and I'll also put today's meeting agenda on the chat, in the chat as well. So the second link is the today's meeting agenda. So let's go back to the meeting minutes that was captured a while ago, which was about 3 weeks ago, when we have the conference call meeting, and then we had the face-to-face meeting. So,
Yeah, definitely.
I'm happy to motion approval of those minutes.
Thank you, Danielle. So we have Danielle motioning, and
I'm happy to second Marika.
All right, thank you, Marika. So we have a mover and a seconder. All right. Anyone has any comments or any things that you think would need to change? Okay, hearing none, let's call to the questions. Anyone oppose to the approval? All right, hearing none. Anyone abstains?
Yeah, I'm an abstain. Stephen, Jane.
Thank you. There's one abstain. So we have 20 participants at the moment, one abstain. Okay, so without any other expression of abstention, so the meeting minutes is approved as shown on the screen, and we have 1800. All right, that out of the way. We have now today's meeting minutes. We have several items on the agenda, and the next item is on the AU patient summary proposal. And I again will put a link to the chat. So therefore, you can take a look. And then we actually has requested people to review and put feedback, and we have received a couple of feedbacks, and then the feedbacks have been reviewed and responses have been provided. So again, the fourth link in the chat is to the feedback page. So I'll go back to the project proposal page, and I will hand over to Daniel to walk us through the process of reviewing and approving the draft project proposal and go through the discussions on the responses to the comments that we have received. So over to you, Anya.
Thanks, Stephen. Hi folks, let's get to the proposal around patient summary FHIR WG. So the project proposal was presented and discussed in the last meeting, and as Stephen noted, it went out for feedback from Stephen after that meeting via email. I'll note the project proposal has changed to address feedback. There is an additional statement to clarify intent, and there are also additional interested parties, the technology vendors. The responses to the feedback were also sent out, I think on Monday, for people to look at. And so interest was also raised in the last meeting in discussing the wider context of patient summaries, and in particular hearing from the Australian Digital Health Agency and hearing from the Department of Health and Aged Care. So I want to welcome Jai from the department and Nicola from the agency to this meeting, and they will speak after the vote. And so in the interest of moving forwards, I'd like to motion that the proposed project is approved.
It's a point of order, Daniel. I think we have. I saw Ruben pop into the meeting. Is Ruben here? Ruben,
Oh yes,
do
he
you
is
have?
here. Awesome.
Yeah, Ruben,
I
do
am,
you
yeah.
have a chance to read the responses, and do you want to talk to the responses before we sort of like put it to a formal motion and seconding and then voting?
Yeah, look, I have read the responses. I don't believe that they've addressed my concern about doing the AU patient summary in the AU core TDG. And I guess further to that, I'd be interested to hear what the department and the agency have to say before we vote on this proposal.
So you want to go through the, hang on, where's the, you want to go through your comments or
So look, I think my comments were centrally about the context for which the AU patient summary, as defined by this IG, what use cases, architecture, and context it would support. And I think the original response was that we would hear from the department and the agency on that. The second point was just the work group in which the content is developed. I'm concerned if it gets done in the AU core TDG. I believe it should be a standalone TDG.
From my perspective, I think the responses to those comments are there, and they're there for the group to make a decision on if that is something that they think they need to reject the project proposal because they don't agree with the response, or if they are actually comfortable with the project proceeding under the AU Core Technical Design Group as the nominated responsible group.
I would also say, to probably add context to that, whilst the group is the overarching, we have two groups right now that have been funded to get work moving. It is still a separate project group whilst they report in. So in terms of having concern that the work is split between a single group, it is actually being moved out as a focused project team with additional people who have interest in that group, Ruben. So I think there is additional information there to provide context that doesn't muddy it in with the other TDG.
I'm not suggesting muddying it in. I'm suggesting creating a new one specifically for this so that there's a clear separation of concerns. Otherwise, why not put all three in one?
And why not? There's no hard rule that says they can't. It's about an administrative efficiency that's set up to do work. They're just groups of people coming together to do work. There is one that already exists. We can get that work done under there. What governance goals aren't being met by proceeding to undertake that work?
I think the stakeholders and the e-requesting are somewhat different versus patient summary, which I think there are potential co-chairs and things like that are going to be almost the same people and probably the same interested parties, stakeholders. as well. So it just seems like an overhead to be spinning up another TDG, more emails.
I mean, I think to a degree, from my perspective, I realise that this is your position, Ruben, and it's not mine. And I think that we've both expressed that. And I think it's at this point we should be taking that to the decision point on where the group is comfortable with, if that is not how the group is comfortable to proceed or not, based on the vote. I know Andy has his hand up.
Andy,
Sorry,
you have your hand up.
interference coming through.
Andy, you have your hand up.
Yes. I mean, I guess I'm noted the same comment in terms of positioning of the implementation guide. And while I understand the efficiencies of where the groups are positioned, I guess I don't really understand Danielle B's kind of comment about the separation, because we're kind of, what he said and what Danielle B said are kind of seem to be two different things. The efficiency of, the single mailing list that's covering AU Core, the challenge at the moment is AU Core TDG and AU Core, the implementation guide, have merged into one. So would we now see all of the correspondence about patient care or patient summary being merged with the AU Core correspondence, given all the correspondence comes from the TDG, not from the project, maybe? But that separation
just in the
is
response
kind of it doesn't exist at the moment. And we do have the same issue with e-requesting, is that the e-requesting TDG is the focal point for all of the collaboration. It's not the project that is the focus for the collaboration, it's the TDG. So binding this all into one, I think is going to create some confusion about whether an issue that we're resolving is being resolved for AU Core, where patient summary is a stakeholder, much like e-requesting is a stakeholder, versus are we now resolving issues in AU Core that now resolves issues for patient summary as though it's a core part of AU Core. And that to me is just a governance confusion I have. So there is some separation. That's great. I just don't know logistically how that works.
Just to clarify, Andy, what my comment was, it's not dissimilar to what Danielle was saying at all. And it wasn't, it was more along the lines of two separate things. The actual work and the work group and the focus of that group is one thing, but the overarching management and efficiencies Danielle was talking about is being able to leverage the frameworks and structure that's already in core. The work actually does align, but the work itself and the focus is separate. And that's where you have a group that's focused on doing the project, just like any other team. At the end of the day, I think this all comes back to the same point Danielle's made, which is you guys have raised concerns. There has been a response provided back. At this point, respect that you both don't necessarily agree, which is why it's being put to a vote. So if others in the group don't agree as well, then we can look at what we do moving forward. I think it's more a case of how do we move this forward?
So Ruben, your response, and then I'm going to put my chair position in, and I progress the discussion forward.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. Yeah, look, I just wanted to flag that at the international level, there are two very separate work groups that manage US Core and IPS. So the patient care work group, which Stephen is co-chair of, looks after IPS, and they are composed of people specifically interested in patient care related content, whereas the cross projects group looks after US core, and they've got a very different focus. And that's not by accident. I'm also a bit concerned that if we put them under the same group, there'll be some sort of implication that these are the same kinds of focuses, and I'm not sure that's necessarily appropriate. The other problem I've got, and this is at a governance level, at AFCC, we are already dealing with a tremendous amount of confusion within Australia on exactly what the FHIR Work Group does, what the board does, what work groups, TDGs, and AFCC does. I'm a little bit concerned that if we have a TDG called AU Core that's doing things beyond AU Core, it's going to further create confusion. And that's part of my argument for having a separate patient summary TDG to do this work in. But that's my point, Stephen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ruben. So I would like us to move forward on this one, but I would also, since Ruben, you mentioned me as the FHIR International Patient Co-Chair, I'm going to put that co-chair hat on and just speak to that a bit before we move forward. FHIR International has a large number of work groups, and which we call technical and clinical domain work groups, and project will find their homes in their particular sort of domain work group spaces. Like say, for example, a lot of the patient care related activities are part sort of projects are part within FHIR patient care. One can argue that, like say, for example, pharmacy type of projects are also patient care related. So therefore, why don't patient care? Why is there a need for pharmacy work group and not patient care taking care of it? But there are kind of pragmatic reasons why the groups are being split, but there are pragmatic reasons that projects are being put within a certain group. Like say, for example, a lot of the OO artifacts that the international group own can also arguably should be moved to patient work group. But there is some pragmatic decision on that. If we were going to go down the path of the FHIR International, where you set up multiple groups, then there is a logistic question of, do we have sufficient people who would be chairing those groups, and without each one of us recycle ourselves, which are likely going to happen in the AU context. I personally have in the past asked for a patient care work group to be set up in FHIR AU, but I think the pragmatic sort of logistic kind of decision prevail. So we just have to be looking at sort of like what is best to move this project forward at this point in time. So I will stop here and hear your comment, Ruben, and then we are going to entertain a motion, is a second, and then I call to the vote. So over to you.
Yeah, look, basically two things. I'm hearing a lot of commentary about logistics and so forth. It seems to me that there's already sufficient interest in people who want to participate in this work. So I don't think that there's going to be any concerns with filling whichever group it is up with people that want to do this. As far as infrastructure and so forth, that's a concern for the board that we are set up to manage. But I think the broader thing I want to mention, Stephen, before we get to the vote, is I do think it's important that we hear from the agency and the department on what the context for this work will be before we actually vote on it. I just want to make sure that what's in the proposal meets the expectation.
I would like to note here that the proposal has been reviewed by the agency and the Department of Health and Aged Care. They approve it, so that is in line with their expectation.
So what are they going to discuss after the vote? And sorry to be speaking about the department, the agency, as if they're not here.
Let's note that this is a project proposal for a FHIR implementation guide, not a national implementation plan. There is always an implementation context for things, but in that case, we have invited representatives to talk about the wider potential implementation context that is relevant for patient summaries in Australia going forwards. Both the representatives from the Department of Health and Aged Care and from the agency will form part of the project team so that we can collaboratively build a FHIR implementation guide together. There is no prior thing that is coming in and going, you must do this, like that's set in the beginning. So this is a project proposal to get together and do a piece of work to start this out as a community-driven standard. And so I think that if the decision from the FHIR Work Group is that, no, we're not interested in doing the patient summary FHIR implementation guide at this time, then we can give our guests from the Department of Health and Aged Care, the agency, the rest of the hour back. But yeah, frankly, I think we can move to a vote and go, is this of interest? Are we going to actually support this project being allowed to go forwards? And then hear from the agency and Department of Health about the wider context and some of those things. And hear also from other people on the line about the relevance of patient summaries in their context.
So
All
based
right,
on what
thank
you're
you.
saying, Danielle, there is no relationship between what we're voting on and that wider context.
I'm saying everything sits within a wider context, but we don't need to I dispute and don't agree with that there needs to be a completely predefined national implementation plan and architecture that's pre-decided before we even start a community-driven standard. That the point of this is to have a project space, to establish a space for the community to come together to work on this together. That's what I'm disputing.
Danielle, I'm happy to have a discussion about the context now if it's helpful.
Happy for you to do that, Nicole. Let's go ahead.
Okay, wonderful. So firstly, thank you for having me as a guest into the group today to be here to speak on behalf of the agency. For those who may not know me, my name's Nicole Gartrell. I'm currently the Acting Branch Manager of Connected Care here at the agency. Unfortunately, Ryan, who is the Acting Branch Manager for Standards and Informatics, is currently overseas, I believe at a HL7 international event, so he was unable to attend today.
I'm looking after him, Nicole, don't worry.
Oh, good. Yes, I did see on LinkedIn there was a few pictures and I was zooming in. I've seen that he's in the chairs. Look, from the agency's perspective, we want this work to have started yesterday. The intention from the agency's roadmap and our context is that the patient summary will replace the current summaries in My Health Record. So that's the discharge summary, event summary, and the shared health summary, with the shared health summary being the most obvious candidate or use case for us in the first instance. We believe that the patient summary will be viewed in My Health Record by clinicians and consumers. And we really need Sparked in this process to complete the patient summary work so that we can have this standardised summary available. There are a number of use cases, I believe, that we could work on at the agency around how the patient summary will move around the healthcare sector. That could include being attached to an e-request. It might support other functionality like provision of services, etc. And those will get fleshed out. However, the agency's position on this is that we are invested in a standardised summary, a FHIR-based summary, and we want to be able to support that through national infrastructure and also the My Health Record. Does that provide sufficient context as what our plans are? Or I'm happy to take questions if there are any.
Just one, Nicole, and that is and thanks for that clarification, that's really helpful. My one question is your intent with supporting the Australian patient summary in the My Health Record for the use cases you've just outlined, that would be based on the FHIR implementation guide we're voting on?
Absolutely, yeah. And
All
also
right,
AU
thank
Core.
you. Great, well, that's precisely the kind of input I was looking for from the agency. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Sanjeed?
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Nicole. Mostly question from a vendor perspective. What kind of timelines do you have in your mind? And how would it look like at a high level strategically? How will this information exchange or the use cases look like? Because that's going to drive a lot of the decision making here.
In terms of timeframes, I don't have the specificity to give you here today. It's something that we're commencing work on, but we're still going through the discovery process today around what that looks like. I expect that the representatives that we have in this group will be able to provide some more clarity and insight on that as it becomes clearer to us what those timeframes look like. And that's part of the reason why we are co-chairing and participating so extensively, particularly in the patient summary work that's going to be happening in this particular group.
So thank you, Nicole, for providing the context. What I would like to bring us back to the scope of and context of this project is that if you have looked at the project proposal and the response here, indicating that the broad scope is to developing an implementation guide that will support a set of broad-based requirements or use cases, including planned and unplanned care and continuity of care and transition of care. It is anticipated or expected that as we go through the development phases, other use cases may be brought to help refine this broader scope of the requirements. So I think in terms of the context of the project, it is quite clearly spelled out in the project proposal. And if we don't have any other questions, I would like us to come back to the agenda item of...
Guy's hands up, Stephen.
Okay, sorry, I didn't see the hands up.
That's right. I was just going to quickly say the department fully supports what Nicole just said. This is about a consistent approach to patient summaries. We need this FHIR IG work to start so we can engage with the community and work through those initial use cases and in particular what is achievable in a release 1 versus subsequent iterative releases. The other thing I would say in terms of the questions around the positioning of the special interest group versus a dedicated TDG, the whole point of this 2-year trial is to try things differently. So I think this is an important component of doing a bit of a test and learn with this process and seeing how that works. If we find as we go through that maybe the next iterations of use cases won't follow that same pathway, that's not an issue. We work through it, but we need to be trying things differently and we need to, I guess, look at what is a sensible and consistent approach to managing some of the work and the governance in this space. So I guess that's it from me, but happy to move to voting.
Thank you, Jai. So Daniel previously moved to accept the project proposal. And do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Daniel. So we have 2 Daniels, 1 move, 1 second the proposal. So we have gone through quite a fair bit of conversations and discussions about this project proposal already. So I just want to make clear that we have addressed all the questions that have been raised and there are no other outstanding questions. So before we put the proposal to the vote, are there any other further questions or issues that members at today's meeting would like to bring forward for discussions before we call to the vote? All right, hearing none.
Stephen, can I just ask, do you want me to launch this as a poll so we can record this?
Sounds like a good idea. So if you want to, Brett, please do that. Let's launch the poll for the vote.
Since I'm a co-host, I can't vote, so +1 affirmative for me.
Yeah, and +1 affirmative for me as well as a co-host.
Okay.
So give
in. A couple more minutes, a couple more seconds.
Yeah, I think we have reached 100% participation. No, not yet.
No, we have
15.
About 90. Okay, we have reached 100%. I think 87.
15.
Hang on, 87:13. Okay.
Yep, I think we have reached 100% now. With,
All right. Okay, we'll end the poll.
So I will end that now.
Yep.
So can you see the numbers, Stephen?
I have, hang on, the number is I
can tell you if you like.
Okay, if you can. Yep.
Yeah, I've got 14 plus Danielle and myself, so 16.
Yep.
Affirmative, 2 negative, and 0 abstentions.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I think we have the motion carried with the result of the vote. Thank you. All right. Hang on. All right. Okay, with this agenda item out of the way, then let's move to the next one. The next one will be on ballot updates. So
sorry, I guess just before we move on, I also wanted to see if there were any other questions that people wanted to ask in relation to Department of Health and Agency. So we did have a set of questions prior to moving to vote, but also if there are any other context, wider context in terms of patient summary implementation or any other things that we wanted to ask from either the Department of Health or Agency or any of the other members on the line who I know are also interested parties in that group. And if there's anyone, I think, and if not, and it doesn't seem like there is any interest in having that conversation here, that we can also have that conversation in a couple of other spots going forwards around the project team. And also, I think that we can expect to see some further comms from that through things like patient summary in the clinical design group.
Yeah, the project would the project will be established, and I'm sure that there will be further opportunities for discussions, so we can leave those discussion points at a later stage. Right. Let's move on to
sorry, Stephen.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to quickly cover, I guess, just because I was asked to come and give our use case, which is slightly different to Nicole's, obviously, and I think it's important just to cover off kind of there are a couple of people. It's not just the agency and the department that are interested in IPS. There are a number of groups that are actually looking at different implementations and use case of IPS that this is intended to cover. So I think we just need to understand broadly, it is that broader approach. From our perspective, what we're actually looking at is specifically the transition of care, not just from creation in conjunction with a referral, but actually patient-led. So if I, as a GP, for example, create a patient summary for a patient, they have that pointer, it could be a QR code, could be any token. They can access that patient summary themselves either via a website or their own personal patient app. But they can also provide or present that token to a secondary clinician, let's say if they're interstate, so GP to GP transfer, or if they were to transition to hospital, for example. So they can provide that token, at which point the patient summary can be retrieved. So we're looking at it from a slightly different use case, but it still is an adjunct to what the department and agency are doing.
And thank you for that. Any comments?
If I can just add to that, it's Juanita here from InterSystems. Slightly, a bit on the use case, but we got a couple of existing customers, which are mostly jurisdictions. So W Health and SA Health, who's approached us and talking to us about the AU patient summary. So is there a plan from the department to engage with jurisdictions on that project, or is it purely, on the My Health record? So where does that sit? Yeah.
No, so it's broader than My Health record. We certainly want jurisdictions and others involved in this, and then we work through as a community to see what that initial first release looks like.
Right. Okay.
And just to add to that, Juanito, the use case that we're doing in terms of transition of care includes a hospital as well. So we are actually looking at how we can generate a patient summary into a hospital via the HIE. Cool.
Yep. Perfect.
It would be great if we had those jurisdictional participants coming along to these things that have interest, because it's obviously we want to capture their interest as well and requirements.
So to
we
that
are
point,
certainly encouraging it.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. So would you like them to be part of the FHIR? And that's where I just joined because Nicole couldn't be here. Do you want them to be part of the FHIR Work Group, or is it more the TDGs, or what level would you like them to be engaged?
I think at least with the project, yeah, because obviously they have a specific interest in this material. We'd like them everywhere, but it's
right, yeah, okay,
yeah, but I think it's a good opportunity if they have a specific interest. Yeah.
So I think I'll respond to that one. So this is not the only gate to establish the project. After board approval is done, there will be a call, I guess, an expression of interest for participants to join the patient summary project team. And we would love for the jurisdictions, if it's a patient summary implementation focus, to be joining that particular project team. But as others have said, there's lots of things going on, like e-requesting and core and so forth, and we want them everywhere. But it's patient summary specific to patient summary.
And from their perspective, they would rather be where it's required, I suppose. Okay, thanks. I think that's fair. So we'll wait. So is there a timeline for that expression of interest to be released?
Yeah, so it needs board approval first to establish the project, and then we'll send out an email. And that email, I think, will likely go to both come out from Sparked, but it would also come out from HL7 Australia. So it would come out to like the FHIR Work Group list, and we'd also put it on our LinkedIn on Sparked side to announce that. It'd also go up on Zulip. So I think the announcement then of the fact that there's a project that is established, if it is approved by the board, would be hopefully like across all the different visible spots for people to pick that up.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
And that would definitely include you, Anita.
Okay. Thank you.
So Anita, you will see on the screen here there is the project sort of a page that I include people who have expressed interest, and the list is long, and I expect that there will be more people who will have the interest to join, and then the list will grow. And to sort of finish off the scope of the project, as we have spoken earlier, at this point in time is broad and not just limited to My Health Record, and we will expect sort of more use cases to be brought to the project, which would then also be considered for either sort of changing the scope or refining the scope, and this will be move forward as the project progresses. So with that, I think we can wrap up the conversation on the project proposal. Daniel, next step. So what would that next step be?
The next step is board approval. And so that needs to go to the board. If the board approves, as in the project is established, it's, there is okay to do work on a HL7 Australia patient summary FHIR implementation guide. Then the next step after that would be the comms would come out to ask for expression of interest for people to, I guess, form that project team, and there'll also be spaces therefore then on the Sparked website and also across HL7 Australia's Confluence to set up those spaces, and the calls, a sort of a list serve across for patient summary calls would all be there. Obviously, this absolutely can't start until we have board approval in place. So that should be, that will be October. We'll get, I think, a response from the board on whether or not they are happy to approve work on a patient summary FHIR WG.
All right, thank you for that. I was actually about to ask Brett about the board approval timeline, but you have provided the answer already, so that's all good. So with all being said, I think that we can move on to the next agenda item, unless I have people who have burning questions on this proposal. All right.
No burning question, but I just wanted to say thank you very much for having me, and I will jump off now. And if you would ever like us to come back and have more discussion about what we're planning or what our roadmap looks like, more than happy to do that with interested parties. Thank you very much.
Excellent. I'm going to note you down for the patient summary calls. Thank you very much.
All right. Okay. agenda item number 3, updates for the 5 ballots that has just gone past. So, Brett, I believe that this is your item.
Yeah, this will be pretty brief. Just to note, we've received issues through our FHIR ballot process. So we have 47 issues logged against AU base. Some of those have been referred to us from some of the other groups. We're still going through co-chair triage on a lot of these. However, there are pages there where this is all visible and you can see the working through of that. So if you do have an interest, definitely do go have a look, and you can comment directly into tickets in Jira as well in terms of if you want to add your 2 cents. There's a number of things that are kind of heading towards being triaged towards electronic votes. So we'll be putting those together and putting together block votes around some of the material that's hopefully not too controversial and can be directly handled. So we'll stand by for that. We'll send out correspondence around those things and announce those with plenty of warning to vote on them. And there will be a number of items that will need to be discussed in the work group. I think there's some broad sort of requirements. There's a bit of dealing with content that it overlaps with other groups' concerns as well. So we're going to probably need to work through some of that material to get it covered off. I'm particularly thinking of coverage and service request with e-requesting, and there's some common interest around gender and sex concepts and other things that have been noted as well. There's also a bunch of editorial shared material across groups, so there's already been sort of co-chairs discussion around some of that as a group to try and cover off the common material across different specs. And some of the stuff has actually been pushed up to the board already, particularly around licensing statements and that, as well as to essentially take that out of the FHIR Work Group's responsibility to directly comment on that, as it's pretty much a policy decision for HL7 Australia. So I'll just note all the material is there. The issues are listed. We're trying to segment them. If you do have anything to add, please do so ASAP, because the co-chairs are going through triage, and yeah, we expect to be teeing up discussion items for next meetings, and also keep an eye out for electronic votes. And that's about it, really. Do you have anything to add, Daniel? Stephen?
Okay, cool.
Jane?
So plan going forward with those categories that are listed under item number 3. So what's the plan?
I think we still need to finish our triage. So yeah, basically they're being segmented a bit, and we looked at yeah, I think we need to sort that out. Yeah.
So the intention that had been discussed through the triage is that the next FHIR Work Group meeting is ballot reconciliation. Now what that means is that we will need to be sending out notification of the proposed issues for discussion and any relevant notes for those at least a week in advance. So we've got really, while we're not ready to announce that today, ideally we'll actually see an announcement, I think, out from us this week that will put together the list of items for the next meeting. There's kind of there's a separation, I guess, of 2 things here. Those that are relevant only to AU base, because that is, the FHIR Work Group is the responsible group basically for going through and doing all those items. But then we have where there are shared content. So it's like there's an official statement and it crosses across all 3 IGs. And so we're just finalising pulling together that list now across what was raised in e-requesting, but would actually change every IG, what was raised in AU core, but so on and so forth. And the intention is to have a joint session where we discuss what that change should be, and it would therefore impact all 3 IGs. And we would be looking to invite the 3 groups, I guess, that are functioning: e-requesting technical design group, the AU core technical design group, and the FHIR Work Group to those. That's not going to be our next one, I don't think, but I expect it might be the one after. But we just got to just finalise the notes and get what we've got organised, looking across the 3 specs to see what we can pull together to go into that so that we're organised. But yeah, I'm hoping we'll be sending out comms by maybe this Friday, maybe Monday.
Okay, thank you. So with more news to come, and I will process them in the subsequent conference calls. Thank you, Daniel and Brett, on that. Item number 4, who wants to take carriage of that, the mission and charter statements?
Yeah, I sent that correspondence on this during a week or 2 ago. So basically, the idea here was to actually confirm our mission and charter, which is kind of an annual event that we try and make sure we do. So really, there was a noted minor change of some of the projects we referenced as one of them no longer exists. So that was removed from the some current drivers include FHIR Accelerator objectives, regulatory requirements and industry initiatives. We did mention the National Secure Messaging Network group, which no longer operates. So we removed that from the content. Other than that, the content remains unchanged. So I think we obviously are also referencing our decision-making practices, which remain the same as we have previously approved. So so I think having sent that out earlier, looking for discussion, we had, I believe, 0 comments, but correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not aware of any comments that have been made against it. So I would pretty much like to move to approve our mission and charter, including our decision-making practices.
So I put it up on the screen, and I also put a link in the chat. So for those of you who want to look it on your own device, then feel free to do so. If we don't have any further comments or discussions, I am happy to entertain a motion. So, Brett, you move?
I'll move. Yes, I'll move. Thank you.
Anyone want to second that?
Yeah. Could I make this? Yeah, I'll just make this compound. So this is to approve the mission and charter and decision-making practices documentation.
Okay. Yeah. So let's. Brett moves, and Daniel, you second that. Is that right?
No, it was Jane.
No?
Jane.
Oh, Jane. Okay, thank you. All right, anyone who wants to raise any questions or any issues for discussions before we call to the questions? Brett, do you think that we need to set up a poll for that? Or
we can do that. Yeah, we can do that. Let me fire that off again.
All right. While Brett is firing up that voting page, so
you can add.
Yep.
Yeah, you can add me as an affirmative. Yep.
+1 for me as well, please.
Yeah.
Okay.
So +2 on affirmative. So we're coming through now. We've got 13 out of 17. So we've really got 15 out of 17.
Yeah, I think.
Oh, and Stephen, 16 out of 17.
Yeah. So yeah.
Last chance.
We have 9.
There we go. We have reached 100%.
Yeah, we have reached 100%. Is that 14 affirmative or? 14
plus the 2, so 16 affirmative, and 5 abstentions, no negatives.
Yep. Okay, cool. Thank you. We have the numbers recorded. Oh, cool. Good. All right. So motion carried. Thank you for that.
Cool. Yeah, and I'll just note, I mean, this is a living, breathing mission and charter. So if you believe this, you can always make comments against the existing material anytime. So yeah, feel free to feed back into that, and we will obviously come back to this again probably next year. But if people really want to change things earlier, that's possible as well. So yeah, just please do keep reviewing and think if anything's different or you want to say more, let us know.
All right, we're doing quite well with time. If we don't have any further discussion on item number 4, let's move to item number 5, co-chair elections. And I believe this is also for you to lead the discussion, correct?
Yeah, I have no exciting news to report as yet, other than it has gone to the board. Now we're attempting to work through actually approving the next steps on that. So I can't at this point say that anything has happened, other than it has progressed in the queue in terms of getting approved, and obviously we want to get this done sooner rather than later so that we can move ahead with the process. So this would be to run nominations and potentially election pretty much as soon as possible, but with the aim of filling co-chair positions commencing on the 1st of January next year. So so our aim is to get not only an approval to run the process, but also get our HL7 Australia tooling to run the elections as needed sorted in terms of how we're going to actually operationalise that. So I have no action at this point other than it's progressed.
Just for information, we are talking about co-chairs who have their terms expire by the end of this year, and we also are accepting new nominations for new positions.
Yeah, what went to the board was the ability to add 3 co-chairs to the FHIR Work Group cohort as well as an option. So that's something I guess the co-chairs can decide, but it is possible to expand our total numbers of co-chairs as well.
Can I
From
just...
the current number of 5 to 8?
Well, yeah. So that, I guess the co-chairs need to decide that as the election happens. Yep.
Sorry, Daniel.
I was just going to say, so I mean, noting that we are past the window of, if this is progressed, so are we required to hold up any call for nominations across any group, including the FHIR Work Group, until that point? And then what does that mean for people whose terms are up? So
yeah. So at the moment, terms are up January 1st, so we need to fill those positions before January 1st. So. And
in terms of an election process, an announcement and then sign up and so forth like that, and then the lead in. So I guess do we need further positions from the board to progress?
We do, because I have to enable. I have to have an agreement. At the moment, that's not been agreed to by the board. So so it was initially just to kick off the nominations process, because obviously, depending on how many nominations we get, we'll decide whether we need to run an election process or not.
Okay, so we can move forwards, but we might not be able to finish the process depending on the responses. But that's being taken to the board what to do in that circumstance at the next board meeting, which is in October. So that might actually be addressed before the process is finished, so we can just proceed.
Actually, a motion was made after it wasn't covered in the last board meeting because we ran out of time, but it has been put forward as a motion, just as an online motion. So that may be resolved before the next board meeting, but may not be as well. So I think we're trying to progress that between meetings.
Sorry, I'm just unclear. Can we call for nominations? I suppose.
Yeah, that's my question.
No,
so just to be clear.
no
okay.
Answer. Until the board's approved that. Yep.
Okay, no, thank you. Yeah, I was just getting confused around what actually did or wasn't partial agreement. Thank you. Yes, okay.
No, because part of it too will be a comms plan on the call and if there's anything else that add to the process.
But from the procedural perspectives, those are co-chairs positions that are up for renomination doesn't require board approval. All right. what we are waiting for board approval is the additional co-chair's position, and we want to wrap the two into a single set of activity. Is that what the situation is?
Yeah. So the premise is that we're following HL7 GOM for the nomination to work groups. So as co-chairs, which means that if you're an existing co-chair with your term ending, you can renominate yourself for the next term. If you are a new co-chair, there's going to be a recommendation process, which is what is in the GOM, which is a co-chair and a FHIR Work Group member essentially endorses you to run as co-chair. So there's like an extra hurdle. So that will have to be spelled out, I think, as part of launching the nominations. So that is part of the proposal in terms of how we go about doing this. That's something in the HL7 GOM currently, and we haven't done that before. So we were trying to also set up where the correspondence goes for nominations and all the things that around just operationalizing that. But I think that the nomination process is agreed to, that we can definitely go ahead with that, and then there's some time to sort out the voting tools and processes through that process as well. That's how it was pitched to the board as a two-part exercise. So being able to kick off nominations and have a process, and then move on to a vote as necessary, and support to get the tooling to do that. So at the moment I have there's no action on that, but as soon as there's a result, I will let everyone know in the FHIR Work Group.
All right, so I think that's a good thing that we have a staggered sort of arrangement where we still have co-chairs terms hasn't expired, and then we can continue with that, and then we'll wait for the board approval process to come through, and then we can kickstart the rest of the process. All right, with that done, final item, ballot issues. Any things from you to discuss on that item, Brett?
I don't know. I'm unprepared to be getting to this item because I didn't think we would. I mean, we do have our issues that we have looked at. So I don't know, Daniel. We haven't really triaged much. There's a couple.
So I've got a hard stop at 12 today, so I'm about to.
Oh, you're about to go
off the line. Sorry, and just leave you holding the bag.
That's good.
There are some items that could be talked through and voted on that have been triaged. But that being said, there hasn't been notice for people to attend the meeting, so I don't think that's appropriate process. But you could walk through them, but I think that it might be better to bring the meeting to an early close instead. But I'm going to leave that to you guys because I'm going to have to go to something else. Sorry.
Thanks, Daniel. Yeah, it's I think, Stephen, it might be just worth spending 5 or 10 just looking at what is in that list. I don't think we should really be. I think it's better if we prepare exactly which issues we will be looking at for voting. So if you wouldn't mind, could you click on the next to the ballot status link there? This is our triage space where we've been working through material here. So there's a lot of items here that haven't been triaged. There are kind of proposed dispositions recorded against a lot of them, but not all of them. Particularly, some of these. I particularly am interested in people looking and commenting on whether they think the particular items need discussion in the group. So really, at the moment, we're deciding which things can go to electronic vote and which things can go need to be discussed in the group. I think if you have a particular set of things that you're interested in making sure are discussed in the group, not disposed of as electronic votes, please do indicate that, because it is an option when you actually do vote to say in person, but I'm very happy for people to indicate if they think something is really important. I think there are if you scroll down a little bit, Stephen, to that coverage section. Coverage was one of our profiles that was marked as FMM 0, and kind of part of the FMM 0 content is actually deciding whether we should be resolving these issues and making things up to FMM 1. I think coverage is one of those that I think there's been some healthy comments around that. E-requesting is definitely interested in the structure and content of this. So I think that would be a good thing to probably discuss on the call. I think there's a bit of terminology usage and Australianization of that's kind of interesting. Medicines list is very untriaged in terms of there needs to be some work done on that, so I might skip through that one. But that was some of the stuff related to medicine list profiles. If we go down a bit further, Stephen, we've got this editorial section. There's a lot of shared content. There's particularly around the narrative of AU Base's relationship with other IGs, future of AU Base and other content like that, which is it's mainly supporting material, but there was quite a lot of interest in that. The other IGs, AU Core and e-requesting, also have similar content, so there's a bit of shared kind of material in there as well. So I think that's probably where that sort of shared discussion might happen. So we'll probably have a broader group meet, including FHIR Work Group, to resolve those fully, because they affect all the IGs. Service requests, there's a couple of notable items in there, which I think is probably a good thing for discussion, because we've got an overlap between e-requesting and FHIR Work Group. There's a few structural issues as well around service requests, so I think that was one that's definitely worth discussing in the group, and probably will have e-requesting participants heavily involved with that as well. There's a set of stuff on diagnostic reports. I think that will probably need a discussion as well. The whole premise of some of the diagnostic report modelling in FHIR Work Group probably needs a discussion. Might go on gender and sex concepts. There's quite a lot of reuse of the gender and sex concepts across specs. So again, I think this is one of the shared kind of items. I think Ruben has definitely been leading out on getting some things seen to here. We had a specific discussion as some of the co-chairs with Ruben to try and get a position on that. And I think we kind of worked through some of that, and there's a lot of probably future work noted as part of these. So this may well be just resolved by electronic vote. But if you see anything special in there, let us know. There's a couple of just general items with triage there. Some duplicates. There's some down in the modeling and metadata bit there. There's some modelers concerns in here. So I think these are much more. There's quite more technical in nature. I think there's probably a cohort of people that may be interested in this. A lot of it is around terminology management and structure. So I think we'll have to probably. I'm not sure how we're going to deal with these, because these are some big modelling decisions in terms of what level we do some of our modelling at. So not so much a content problem as a technical problem. We may well bring that to the group to discuss, but I think we'll probably have some modelers discuss this beforehand and try and present a position as to what should be done. And we have board level issues. So the board level content, these are things that are essentially mostly license and copyright statement based material. Really, that's something that whilst the FHIR Work Group could look at, we've essentially outsourced to the board as being a legal concern, and essentially these are technical in nature in terms of the legality of the content. So there will be an updated licensing statement, and mostly this is just bringing some of the content up to date and also clearing up some of the relationships to some of the other third parties that we do reference as well. Bunch of technical corrections. These are things that are just dealt with by co-chairs. So pretty much these are just minor structural technical content, so nothing substantive in here. So if you are interested, you can see what's happened with those, but those won't come to the group at all. And that's about it. So so hopefully, if you do get a chance, please do see if there's any tickets there that you have concerns with particularly. But other than that, I think we should probably just leave it alone.
Just a quick clarification, out of scope, you mean out of scope for this work group, not out of scope altogether?
Okay. Yes. Yeah, we've got some empty sections there, but we just have them there for completeness. But we'll be still sorting some of these as well. So some of them might move around into different categories. It's mainly starting to look at how we might block them for block votes as well. So so if you have a favorite ticket that you think needs special attention, that's good. This is the time to highlight that, so we can deal with it to your satisfaction. Anyway,
all right, I think that's it.
Yeah, that's about it. Yeah, I think that's probably all that's worth doing. And
thank you
and
for
we'll
the
definitely come back. Yeah, when we do come back, we'll have specific content that we'll look at in meetings, so we should be able to give you prior warning about what's going to be covered. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right.
Cool.
With that done, anything else that we have questions on? If not, then I think we can close the meeting. I will give each of us 20 minutes back.
Amazing. Thank you, Stephen. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Talk again next
Thank
time.
you.
Thank you.
Cheers.